In this podcast episode, Erica Komisar explores the psychological and developmental impact of divorce on children and adults, addressing attachment theory, the challenges of co-parenting, and the societal and biological factors influencing family dynamics. She discusses why her work is viewed as controversial, the neurobiology of stress in young children, divorce's effects on emotional security, and how parenting practices and social systems shape children's mental health trajectories. The conversation also delves into gender roles, maternity leave, childcare, and the broader cultural shifts that complicate family structures and children's well-being. Erica Komisar explains that her work is controversial because she speaks inconvenient truths, especially about the primacy of a mother or primary caregiver's presence in the first 3 years of life. Her messages have been misconstrued as anti-feminist, despite her intention to highlight attachment security rather than discourage women from working. She notes society's strong emphasis on universal workforce participation has made discussions about early maternal presence sensitive. Her more recent work on divorce is also contentious, primarily due to her critique of the growing push for 50-50 custody arrangements, which she argues may treat children as possessions rather than considering their developmental needs. Divorce universally challenges a child's emotional security and sense of permanence in relationships. Komisar acknowledges that while no divorce is inherently good for children, chronic and high-conflict marital situations are often worse than divorce itself. She stresses the value of a good divorce over a toxic marriage where children are exposed to continual parental hostility. However, divorce is never without cost, as it tests children's resilience and feelings of safety, especially in the crucial early years of brain development. According to Komisar, the first 3 years of life represent an essential window for brain growth and attachment formation. She controversially suggests avoiding divorce during this period unless abusive situations demand immediate separation. By maintaining stability in these years, parents help their children build secure attachment patterns. Other sensitive periods include early adolescence, roughly ages 11 to 14, considered the most unstable phase where divorce can profoundly disrupt emotional development. She encourages parents who must divorce during adolescence to wait until late adolescence or after college to reduce trauma, though acknowledging no time is ideal. Komisar highlights how stress profoundly affects the developing brain, particularly the amygdala's role in stress regulation. Babies require their primary attachment figure's physical and emotional presence to buffer stress and regulate cortisol levels effectively. Chronic early stress leads to an overactive amygdala, impairing future stress management and emotional regulation, contributing to anxiety, depression, and attention issues often mislabeled as ADHD. She discusses how babies are neurologically fragile at birth and need a fourth trimester of close contact for healthy brain architecture, opposing prevailing Western norms that prize independence from birth. Komisar discusses the sensitivity gene, specifically a variation of the serotonin receptor, which predisposes some children to heightened stress sensitivity. However, whether this gene leads to problems strongly depends on the caregiving environment. Sensitive nurturing presence can neutralize the gene's negative effects, but neglect or excessive stress exacerbates it. She touches on the concept of highly sensitive persons, HSPs, as being loosely connected to this genetic predisposition, emphasizing the environment's critical moderating role. Erica clarifies the distinct but complementary roles mothers and fathers typically play in early child development due to differing hormonal influences. Mothers predominantly provide soothing and emotional regulation through oxytocin-driven nurturing during breastfeeding and close contact, essential in the early years. Fathers, influenced by vasopressin, often engage in playful, tactile stimulation important for resilience, but cannot substitute for the primary attachment figure's role. She criticizes court systems that impose 50-50 custody on infants as developmentally harmful, likening such splits to King Solomon's infamous splitting the baby judgment, which neglects the child's need for a stable primary caregiver. While acknowledging that parental alienation, when one parent actively obstructs the child's relationship with the other, is real and harmful, Komisar stresses it is less common than assumed. The pain and hostility parents experience during divorce can result in resentment and alienation, often rooted in unprocessed grief. She advises educating parents to remain child-centric, fostering cooperation and communication rather than litigious battles. Komisar advocates for arrangements where children maintain a stable primary residence, particularly during the school week, avoiding frequent moves, such as the problematic 2-3-2 custody schedule. She recommends nesting in the immediate aftermath of divorce, where children stay in one home and parents alternate visits, minimizing disruption. Physical proximity of parents is emphasized to maintain routines and daily connections. Moves out of state are generally discouraged as they disrupt attachment and impose undue trauma on children, especially infants. Divorce represents a loss akin to mourning death. Children progress through stages of grief, such as disbelief, sadness, anger, and ideally acceptance. Parents need to manage their own emotional processing to avoid burdening children with adult conflicts or oversharing their pain, which can stunt children's ability to heal and adjust. Komisar stresses that how parents communicate about divorce shapes children's ongoing trust in relationships and sense of security. Children often engage in magical thinking, mistakenly believing they caused their parents' breakup and thus can fix it. This self-blame stems from their egocentric worldview during early development. Parents must actively dispel these myths and reassure children that they are loved and not responsible for the divorce to prevent long-term psychological damage. Children are emotionally perceptive and can detect dishonesty. Komisar encourages sensitive, age-appropriate honesty about divorce without making irresponsible promises that may later break trust. Parents should avoid disparaging the other parent or expressing regret about the marriage in front of children, as these messages harm a child's self-concept and feeling of security. She suggests choosing optimal moments with minimal external stress for disclosing divorce news. Attachment security is vital throughout childhood, but especially in the first 3 years when the brain undergoes high plasticity. Secure attachment arises from consistent physical and emotional presence of a responsive primary caregiver who regulates the infant's distress and cortisol levels through skin-to-skin contact and interactive emotional co-regulation. Western cultural norms often undervalue this need, promoting independence and early separation that undermine brain development and contribute to rising mental health crises. Komisar critiques societal trends that privilege workforce participation above maternal caregiving, driven by individualistic and narcissistic cultural impulses. She locates the origin of these trends partially in the Industrial Revolution and second-wave feminism, which devalued maternal labor in favor of women competing in male-dominated workspaces. This has led to undervaluing early childhood needs, pushing women back into careers prematurely, often without sufficient societal support, such as paid maternity leave. Daycare settings are often detrimental to children's stress regulation due to caregiver-to-child ratios that make individual emotional regulation impossible. Elevated cortisol levels in daycare contribute to long-term emotional dysregulation. Komisar recommends kinship care, in-home caregivers, or small-scale shared care as better alternatives and denounces institutional daycare centers as day orphanages. She highlights the importance of agency and monitoring in choosing childcare. Attachment patterns are not genetically inherited, but pass through inheritance of acquired characteristics, meaning children adopt the attachment strategies modeled by their caregivers. Caregivers' secure or insecure attachment profoundly influences the child's attachment organization. This early relational template shapes mental health outcomes, with insecure or disorganized attachment raising the risk for depression, anxiety, and borderline personality disorder. Boys tend to be neurologically more sensitive to stress prenatally and postnatally, often manifesting more behavioral and attentional problems. Girls show heightened social sensitivity in adolescence, particularly to criticism, a factor aggravated by social media. Fathers' nurturing behaviors are typically more playful and protective, contrasting with mothers' empathetic, emotional soothing, a difference rooted in hormones such as oxytocin and vasopressin. Fathers can be effective caregivers, but often require teaching and support. The U.S. lacks federally mandated paid maternity leave, which Komisar denounces as barbaric and counterproductive to family and mental health. She advocates for 12 to 18 months of paid leave, starting before birth, to reduce prenatal cortisol and postpartum depression, enabling mothers to provide optimal early nurturing. Other countries' policies serve as models for supporting children's neurological and emotional development through robust family leave and support systems. Divorce challenges children's fundamental belief in permanence and omnipotence in parental relationships, leaving many struggling with trust in adult romantic relationships later in life. Children face the shattering of their illusion that parents are perfect and omnipotent protectors, which may cause difficulties in forming their own stable relationships. Parents must develop emotional regulation to avoid leaking their unresolved pain onto children during divorce. Komisar emphasizes the importance of therapy and support systems for divorcing parents, as effective co-parenting requires self-awareness and sacrifice. Healthy emotional management in parents creates conditions for children's resilience and well-being. Modern motherhood involves difficult compromises, especially balancing career ambitions against the need for physical and emotional presence with children. Komisar critiques cultural messages that devalue maternal caregiving and overemphasize external achievements. She encourages embracing motherhood's value and reframing career and success on broader, more meaningful metrics than materialism and status. Both physical and emotional presence of caregivers are necessary for secure attachment and emotional regulation in children. Physical presence without emotional availability, such as parental distraction or depression, harms children just as much as absence. The idea of quality time is rejected as a myth used to justify parental absence. Consistent, attuned presence functions metaphorically as children's emotional digestive system. With evolving socioeconomic roles, some families involve women as primary breadwinners and men as primary caregivers. While possible, this shift requires fathers to cultivate sensitive and empathic nurturing skills, which do not always come naturally. Sexual dynamics and masculine identity can be challenged by these role reversals, creating relational tensions that need acknowledgement and navigation. Komisar advocates for child-centric divorce approaches that prioritize respectful cooperation, maintain attachment security, and minimize disruption. Parenting sacrifices, respectful communication, and proximity foster better emotional outcomes for children. She contends current legal systems often lack psychological awareness, disproportionately emphasizing parental fairness over children's developmental needs. Children's magical thinking leads them to distort and personalize parental conflicts. Parents must consciously counteract these patterns through honest but sensitive communication and by maintaining a protective emotional environment. Recognizing the child's developmental needs for omnipotence and security prevents psychological wounds and fosters healthier adult relationships. Erica stresses the value of extended family and communal living for child-rearing, contrasting modern nuclear family isolation with traditional multi-generational caregiving structures. She highlights the detrimental effects of eroded community support and the rise of institutional elder and child care, which depersonalizes care and fragments social bonds essential for human development. Long-standing attachment research, including John Bowlby's foundational work and the Strange Situation experiments, demonstrate the crucial role of early secure attachment in healthy emotional development. Neurological differences in infants underpin varying attachment styles, and early adversity or neglect may imprint permanent brain structures, leading to emotional dysregulation and psychiatric vulnerabilities in adulthood. Ultimately, Komisar emphasizes that parenting demands sacrifices and discomfort, which must be embraced consciously for children's well-being. She urges society to revalue caregiving work and support families structurally and culturally, to curb the mental health epidemic stemming from early childhood disruption, and to nurture future generations into secure, resilient adults.